Elizabeth Holmes, the verdict. So, Ethan, let's start with the counts. Explain which counts Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty of, which counts she was found not guilty, and then those 3 counts on which the jury could not agree.
So the unanimous 12-member jury, I believe it was 8 men and 4 women, convicted Elizabeth Holmes on, like you said, 4 counts out of the 11 that she was charged with. 1 count of conspiracy for defrauding investors. 3 counts of wire fraud for defrauding investors. The 3 specific wire transfers in question: DeVos family's investment firm, hedge fund manager Brian Grossman, and law firm partner Daniel Mosley. The jury unanimously cleared, meaning not guilty, on the charges for defrauding patients with bogus blood technology. They also hung on 3 additional charges related to investors Chris Lucas, Brian Tolbert, and Alan Eisenman.
What happens to those counts that they could not agree on? Could she be brought up on those charges again in the future?
She could, if the judge allows it, and if the prosecutors choose to have an entire additional trial. I find that to be highly unlikely that they will do that, since they got the 4 convictions.
What happens from here in terms of the appeal process on her end?
Well, there's any number of things that will be done, but there will be an appeal on the conviction, and they will make all kinds of arguments. I don't think they're going to be necessarily successful in this case. I think the judge followed the law pretty closely, but there is definitely going to be an appeal. They could even move for a whole new trial that the judge would have to approve, which I also don't find likely. It's really up to the appeals courts, but that in a criminal trial, the appeal will happen.
How does the sentencing process work, and how long does it usually take?
There is no usual. So it could be anywhere from 20 minutes to 6 months or a year before she's sentenced. And this is going to be one of those cases where her attorneys and the prosecutors are going to make very strong arguments. They're going to be fighting tooth and nail, is one way of describing it, over what should happen with Elizabeth Holmes. Now, remember, for each of these 4 counts, there is a maximum 20-year sentence. And they could potentially stack, which I somehow doubt will happen in this case. However, when you look back at previous years' federal sentences, there's data out there for 2020 that showed in this category of crime, not necessarily this crime with this amount of dollars that are involved, et cetera, but anywhere from 8 to 15 months is a normal sentence per count in this category of crime. So there's a lot that could happen there, but the both sides will argue. Obviously, the defense will argue, the jury hung, the jury didn't convict on these. They did convict her on this, but she has no criminal record. She's not a flight risk. She has a baby. They're going to make lots of arguments because those are things that are considered by the judge. And of course, the prosecution is going to argue these were egregious crimes. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Unbelievable what she did. She damaged the public trust. This has a long reverberating effect. That's why she should get 20 years per. That's what will be argued.
So do you think that the judge will actually give her prison time?
Yes. I think it's almost unquestionable that she will get some prison time. This is like reading tea leaves because it's really up to the discretion of the judge. These are sentencing guidelines, and they are supposed to consider many different factors when a judge sentences somebody. Again, it's things like criminal record, age, sophistication, circumstances, again, she was trying to build a company and she was trying to do something, and she lied about that Pfizer logo in the process, and she made financial projections that were not accurate or based necessarily on fact and didn't communicate that. So, I mean, if I was to take a wild guess, now remember, this is a guess. Nobody can answer this question. Only the judge can after the arguments are made, and we'll find out what he sentences Elizabeth Holmes. I'm going to guess, though, that this, on the low end, is going to be 3 to 5 years for her in prison, followed by probation. On the high end, I would think it's 10 to 15 years. And of course, remember, with these types of sentences, you can get that reduced for, good behavior and different things in prison. But I think it's anywhere from 3 to 5 on the low end to 10 to 15 on the high end. I don't think she's getting anything more than 15 years. But again, it's a guess. I could be totally wrong. But she has no criminal record. She's not a risk. She's young. She has an opportunity to turn her life around. I think the court will consider that. So I would actually suggest it's more likely that it's the 3 to 5 years than it is the 10 to 15.
We heard from 2 of the jurors right away. Sometimes it takes a really long time before we actually get to hear from the jury, and it varies. What determines that?
Nothing. It's up to the juror.
So at any time, the juror is free to talk about that. The judge doesn't put any sort of...
Once their service is over, that's it.
The 2 jurors that did speak out said somewhat conflicting things, but generally it seemed to have the same story about what they believed. And one of the things that stood out that they both said was that they both believed, or that the jury generally all believed, that Elizabeth Holmes believed that she could make this thing happen, that she could make it work, that she believed in her idea and she believed in her technology. And yet, they also found her guilty. And they're saying this in the press. So if you're on her team, what do you do with this information?
Well, there's not a lot that I can do with that information that does not display juror misconduct. It could potentially be an argument that the jury did not apply the law correctly, or that they didn't understand the jury instructions, or that. So let me cut to the chase. What that argument is that the defense will argue in appeal that there was an error in the jury instruction and it misled the jurors and led to an error in how they came to a conclusion, and it was material in whatever the jury instruction argument is going to be that they would make.
What does Elizabeth Holmes' verdict mean for Sunny Balwani, whose case is coming up in the next few weeks?
Well, that's actually the interesting twist in all of this. First off, Sunny Balwani's case, his trial was just delayed due to COVID in Northern California. I believe it was delayed until mid-February now. And what this means, remember, he was charged with the exact same counts as Elizabeth Holmes, and then they separated the trials so that the defendants have that right. Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes agreed that they were going to have a separate trial instead of a joint trial. It's the exact same charges. So if she wasn't found guilty on the patients, there's almost no way that Sunny Balwani could be, although it is possible that there's some different angle that's going to be brought by the prosecutors. What this really importantly, though, in the Sunny Balwani case is that she was convicted of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Conspiracy means you worked with somebody else. And that somebody else in this case is most likely Sunny Balwani. So if she's found guilty of that, that doesn't bode well. And the defense team, lucky for them with COVID, of all crazy things right now, gives them an additional essentially month to prepare an alternate defense to find the weaknesses in what the prosecution presented against Elizabeth Holmes and use new information and a new defense strategy to parry what the prosecution did that was successful against Elizabeth Holmes.
Do you think Elizabeth Holmes will work with prosecutors in Sonny's case, maybe to help her sentencing
No.
become reduced?
No, I don't think she cooperates at all. If I'm her defense counsel, I would argue the same, and that she is not going to be able to cooperate unless for some reason the prosecution between now and Sonny Balwani's trial says, we will ask for a minimum sentence for your cooperation, which I absolutely doubt they would do. I don't know why they would do that, but if they did that, would be about the only way that Elizabeth Holmes would become a cooperating witness with the prosecution.
How would you sentence her if you were the judge?
Wow. I am not a judge, so it's really hard for me to say. But look, I would want to hear the arguments. I think it's really important. And I think, for whatever disagreements I may have with judges in cases when they rule against my client, I think judges do a fairly good job when it comes to sentencing, that they listen and they contemplate. And I think that's the most important thing when it comes to sentencing, is that the judge listens to what the prosecution states and argues, listens and considers what the defense argues regarding sentencing, and then weighs that against what actually transpired here. So really what we're finding is that there's a conviction that the DeVos family fund was out some money due to Elizabeth Holmes misleading them and two other investors, and that there was this conspiracy to defraud them. My problem with this is those are three individuals, they're professional investors. To me, that's far less egregious than if she had taken hundreds of millions of dollars from the public through lies and deceit of material fact, as she was convicted of here. So in my mind, this is actually a far lesser crime and should be thought of that way. When super wealthy people are able to convince prosecutors to go after somebody like Elizabeth Holmes, that should have less weight than when she steals from or misleads from or commits she was convicted of here, wire fraud against regular investors. I really think those should be different things, and they should be weighed differently. And our law is not written that way, but a judge can consider it that way. So if I'm the judge in this case, first off, again, I would listen to the arguments from both sides, and then I would look at what she was convicted of and her age and everything else. I would probably sentence her 3 to 5 years in prison with some number of years of parole after that. And I would restrict her from participating as an executive in any kind of an investment scheme for at least 10 years post her time is completed. So that's how I would look at it.
In general, will she be allowed to do book deals, movies, things like that?
No, there's a rule against profiting from what you were convicted of. So she can write other books, and she can even write a form of a life story
like a
at
memoir.
Some point. But that's going to be after her sentence has been fully served before she can profit from that. You're not allowed to profit from that while you're under sentence. So that would include parole.
Can she work on it?
Of course. I mean,
she
you
can
work
negotiate
on it. And then the minute
work
everything's
on
done,
projects.
look at Michael Cohen. That's exactly what he did. He worked on it while he was imprisoned.
But she can work on deals with people. She can talk to people and create.
She can't receive a penny, though. Cannot receive any money from it until everything is complete. So she can work on stuff. She can't receive a penny.
If she gets time in prison, where will she go?
That is something that's oft negotiated, but I find to be really unacceptable about our justice system is we have something called, that is colloquially called Club Fed. And these are special prisons where you can pay money and have essentially a fairly easy prison experience. And it's for those who have the means to pay for it. And I'm going to quote Larry Levine, director and founder of the Wall Street Prison Consultants, in a Washington Post article. And he says, quote, "It's kind of like a junior college setting. I don't want to call it a stress-free environment, but it's a lot of hanging out with other inmates, just bull bleeping. It's easy time, not hard time. And it is something that happens, again, if you're a person of means, you can get that.
And it's safe. It's a safe environment.
Because it's only going to be it's not for violent criminals are not allowed to enter into this program. And it's going to be other kind of wealthy individuals who are just trying to take it easy, like yourself in this case, if you're Elizabeth Holmes. I got to say this again. I find it reprehensible that we have that. If regular prison isn't good enough for somebody else who is not of means, who was convicted of wire fraud, then fix that. There should absolutely not be a two-tier system where just because you're wealthy, you get to have an easy prison experience. And that person over there has to suffer, and it's painful, and it's horrible, and it's unpleasant, and it's dangerous. I just find it so unacceptable that we have this setup, and I sincerely hope that we change it at some time in the near future.
Thank you for listening to Law Junkie Show. Please subscribe to Law Junkie Show on Apple Podcasts and on YouTube. Follow us on social media. Visit us at lawjunkieshow.com. Send us a message there on the contact form, or send us a message at info@lawjunkieshow.com.
Disclaimer: Law Junkie Show, including its guests and hosts, are not giving out legal advice, but discussing general legal issues. Law Junkie Show does not guarantee that the legal issues discussed are fully accurate, and it's not specific to whatever legal issues you may be experiencing. None of this advice is to be acted upon in your situation. Please seek legal advice from a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction for your individual legal matter.